Peter Pan, Chapter 4, The Flight. Second to the right, and straight on till the moon, till the morning. That Peter had told Wendy was the way to Neverland. But even birds carrying maps and counseling them as Wendy's corners could not have cited it with these instructions. Peter, you see, just said anything that came into his head. At first, his companions trusted him implicitly, which means totally. And so great were the delightful of flying that they wanted time circling around the church, spiraling, or any other tall object on the way that took their fancy. John and Michael raced. Michael getting a start, they recalled with the contentment that not so long ago they had thought themselves fine fellows, being able to fly around a room. That's Tinkerbell, Peter, Wendy, John, and Michael. Sometimes it was dark, and sometimes it was light. And now they were very cold, and again too warm. Did they really feel hungry at times? Or were they just merely pretending? Because Peter had put such jolly new ways of feeding them. His way was to persuade birds that they had food in their mouths suitable for humans and a snack from which them and snatched it from them. Then the birds would follow and snatch it back, and they would all go chasing each other gallantly for miles, partaking at last with mutual expressions of goodwill. But Wendy noticed when the gentle concern that Peter did not seem to know that this was rather an odd way of getting your bread and butter, not even that there are other ways. Certainly, they did not pretend to be sleepy. They were sleeping, and that was a danger, for then a moment they popped off. Down they fell. The awful thing it was that Peter thought this was funny. "There he goes again," he would cry gleefully as Michael suddenly dropped like a stone. "Save him!" cried Wendy. "Save him!" Looking with horror at the cruel sea far below, eventually Peter would dive down through the air, crashing to catch Michael just before he could strike the sea. And it was lovely the way he did it, but he always waited till the last moment, and you felt it was his cleverness that interested him and not the saving. Of a human life. Also, he was fond of variety, and the spot that engrossed him one moment would suddenly cease to engage him. So there was always the possibility that the next time you fell, he would let you go. He could sleep into the air without falling by merely lying on his back and floating. But that was partly at least because he was so light that if you got behind him and blew, he went faster. "Do be more polite to him," Wendy whispered to John when they were playing. "Follow my lead." Follow my leader." "Then tell him to stop showing off," said John. When playing Follow My Leader, Peter would fly close to water and touch each shark's tail as in passing. Just as in the street you may run your fingers along an iron rail, then could not follow him. It was with such much success, so perhaps it was rather like showing off, especially as he kept looking behind to see how many tails they missed. "You be nice to him," Wendy impressed on her brothers. "What could we do if he were to leave us?" "We could go back," Michael said. "How would we ever find our way back without him?" "Well, then we can go on," said John. "That is an awful thing, John. We should have to go on, for we don't know how to stop." This was true. Peter had forgotten to show them how to stop. John said, "That is first. The worst came to the worst. All they had to do was to go straight on, for the world was round, and so it was time they must come back to their own window." "And who is to get food for us, John?" "I nipped a bit out of the eagle's mouth pretty neatly, Wendy." "After the 20th try," Wendy reminded him, "and even though we became good pickings of food, see how we pumped against the clouds and things. If he did not near to give us a hand, indeed they were constantly bumping. They could not fly strong, though they still kick far too much. But if they saw a cloud in front of them, the more they tried to avoid it, the more certainly they did bump it. If Nana had been with them, she would have a bandage around Michael's head by this time." Peter was not with them for the moment, and they felt rather lonely up there by themselves. He could go much faster, and then they would have suddenly shoot out of sight to have some adventure in which they had no share. He would come down laughing over something fearfully funny he had been saying to a star, but he was already forgotten what it was, or he would come up with the mermaid scale, still sticking to him, and yet not be able to say for certain what had happened. It was really rather irritating to the children who had never seen a mermaid. "And if he forgets them so quickly," Wendy argued, "how can we expect that he will remember us when he goes?" Indeed, sometimes when he returns, he did not remember them, at least not well. Wendy was sure of it. She saw recognition come into his eyes as he went on about to pass them in the time of the day and go on. Once even she had to call him by name. "I'm Wendy," she said agitatedly. "He was very sorry, I said, Wendy," he whispered to her. "Always, if you see me forgetting you, just keep on saying, 'I'm Wendy,' and then I'll remember, of course." That was rather unsatisfactory. However, to make amends, he showed them how to lie flat on the strong wind that was going their way, and this was such a pleasant change that they had tired in several times and found that they could sleep thus with security. Indeed, they would have slept longer, but Peter tired quickly of sleeping, and soon he would cry in his captain's voice, "We get off here!" So with the occasional tiffs, but on the whole reckoning, they drew near the Neverland, for after many moons they did reach it, and what is more, they had been going pretty straight all the time, not perhaps so much owing to the guidance of Peter or Tink, as because the island was looking for them. It was only thus that anyone may sight those magic shores. "There it is," Peter said. "Where? Where? Where's all the arrows pointing?" Indeed, 1,000,000 golden arrows were pointing it out to the children, all directions by their friend, the sun, who wanted them but to be sure of the way before leaving them for the night. Wendy, John, and Michael stood on tiptoe in the air to get their first sight of the island. Strange to say, they all recognized it at once, and until fear fell upon them, they hailed it not as something long dreamt and seen at last, but as a familiar friend to whom they were returning home for the holidays. "John, look! There's a lagoon!" Wendy looked at the turtles burying their eggs in the sand. "I say, John, I see your flamingo with your brother's leg. Look, Michael, there's your cave. John, was that in the brushwood? It's a wolf with her whelps. Wendy, I do believe that's your little whelp. There's my boat, John, with her sides shoved in. No, it isn't. Why, we burned your boat. That's her. At any rate, I say, John, I see the smoke of the resin camp." "Where? Show me. I'll tell you by the way of the smoke. Curls whether there are on the warpaths, just across the Mystery River. I see now. Yes, there they are, on warpath right enough." Peter was a little annoyed with them for knowing so much, but if he wanted to lure it over them, a triumph was at hand. "For I have not told you that anon fear fell upon them. It came as the arrows went leaving the island in gloom. In the old days, at the home of Neverland, having always begun to look a little dark and threatening by bedtime, the unexplored patches arose in spread blackness, shadows moving about them. The roar of the beast was prey for quite different now, and above all, you lost your century that you would win. You were quite glad that the night lights were on. You even liked Nana to say that this was just the mantelpiece over there, and that Neverland was all make-believe. Of course, the Neverland had never been make-believe in those days, but it was real now. And there were no night lights, and it was getting darker every moment. And where was Nana? They had been flying apart, but they huddled close to Peter now. His careless manner had gone at last. His eyes were sparkling, and the tingle went through them every time they touched his body. They were now over their fearsome island, flying so low that sometimes a tree grazed their feet. Nothing horrid was visible in the air, yet their progress had been slowed to a labor, exactly as if they were pushing their way through the hostile forces. Sometimes they hung in the air until Peter had beaten on it with his fists. "They don't want us to land," he explained. "Who are they?" Wendy whispered, shuddering. But he could not, or would not say. Tinkerbell had been asleep on his shoulder, but now he wakened her and set her in front. Sometimes He posed himself in the air, listening intensely, with his hand to his ear, and again he would stare down with his eyes so bright that they seemed to bore 2 holes to the earth. Having done these things, he went on again. His courage was almost appalling. "Would you like an adventure now?" he said casually to John. "Or would you like to have your tea first?" Wendy said, "Tea first?" quickly, and Michael pressed her hand with a little gratitude, but the braver John hesitated. "What kind of an adventure?" he asked cautiously. "There's a pirate asleep in the pampas just beneath us," Peter told him. "If you like, we'll go down there and kill him." "I don't see him," John said after a long pause. "I do." "Suppose," John said, a little husky, "he were to wake up," Peter spoke indignantly. "You don't think I would kill him while he was sleeping? I would wake him first, and then kill him. That's the way I always do." "I say, do you kill many?" "Tons," John said. "How ripping. But decide to have tea first." He asked if there was many pirates on the island just now, and Peter said he had never known so many. "Who's the captain now?" "Hook," answered Peter, and his face became very stern, and he said that hated word. "Jas. Hook. Aye." Then indeed Michael began to cry, and even John couldn't speak in gulps only, for they knew Hook's reputation. "He was Blackbeard's bosun," John whispered huskily. "He is the worst of 'em all. He is the only man of whom Barbecue was afraid." "That's him," said Pete. "What is he like? Is he big? Is he not so big as he was?" "How do you mean? I cut off a bit of him." "You?" "Yes, me," said Peter sharply. "I wasn't meaning to be disrespectful." "Oh, all right. But I say, what's a bit? His right hand." "Then how can he fight now?" "Oh, can't he just left-handed? He has an iron hook instead of a right hand, and he claws it with claws." "I say, John," said Peter. "Yeah, say, hey, sir. Hey, sir." "There's one thing," Peter continued, "that every boy who serves under me has to promise as so much as you." John paled. "Is this it? If we meet Hook in an open fight, you must leave him to me?" "I promise," said John loyally. For the moment, there was a feeling less eerie, because Tink was flying with them, and in her light they could distinguish each other. Unfortunately, she could not fly so slowly as they, and so she had to go round and round and round in a circle in which they moved in a halo. Wendy quietly liked it, until Peter pointed out the drawing backs. "She tells me," he says, "that the pirates sighted us before the darkness came, and got Long Tom out." "The big gun?" "Yes. And of course they must see her light, and if they guess we are near it, and they're surely to let fly." "Wendy, John, Michael, tell her to go away at once." "Peter." The 3 cried simultaneously, but he refused. "She thinks we have lost our way," he replied stiffly, "and she is rather frightened. You don't think I would send her away all by herself when she's frightened?" For a moment the circle of light was broken, for something gave Peter a loving pinch. "Then tell her," Wendy begged, "to put out the light." "She can't put it out." "That is about the only thing fairies can do. It just goes out of itself when she falls asleep, same as the stars." Then tell her to sleep at once, John almost ordered. She can't sleep expected when she's sleepy. It is the only other things fairies can't do. Seems to me, growled John, these are the only two things worth doing. Here, he's got a pinch, but not a loving one. If only one of us had a pocket, Peter said. We could carry her in it. However, they had set off in such a hurry that they were not a pocket between the four of them. He had a happy idea. John's hat. Tink agreed to travel by hat if it was to carry in the hand of John. John carried it through, though she had hoped to be carried by Peter. Presently, Wendy took the hat because John said it's striking again and his knee, and it flew, and this, and we shall see, led to mischief, for Tinker Bell hated to be under the obligation to Wendy. In the black topper, the light was completely hidden, and they flew on in silence, in one of the stillest silence they had ever known, broken once by a distant lapping, which Peter explained was the wild beast drinking at the ford, and again by a rasping sound that might have been the branches of trees rubbing together, but he said it was the redskins sharpening their knives. Even these noises ceased. To Michael, the loneliness was dreadful. If only something would make a sound, he cried. As if in answer to his request, the air was rent by the most tremendous crash he had ever heard. The pirates have fired Long Tom at them. The roaring of the echo through the mountains, and the echoes seemed to cry savagely, "Where are they? Where are they? Where are they?" Thus sharply did the terrifying three learn the difference between the island of make-believe and the same island come true. When at last the heavens were steady against John and Michael found themselves alone in the darkness, John was treading the air mechanically, and Michael, without knowing how to float, was floating. "Are you shot?" John whispered tremulously. "I have tried myself out yet," Michael whispered back. "We know how that no one has been hit." Peter, however, had been carried by the wind, the shot far out into the sea, while Wendy had blown upward with no comparison but Tinkerbell. With no companion but Tinkerbell. It would have been well for Wendy if that had a moment she had dropped that hat. I don't know whether the idea came suddenly to Tink or whether she had planned it on the way, but she at once popped out of the hat and began to lure Wendy to her destruction. Tink was not all bad, or rather, she was all bad just now. But on the other hand, sometimes she was all good. Fairies have to be one thing or the other, because being so small, they unfortunately have room for one feeling only at a time. They are, however, allowed to change, only it might be a complete change. At present, she was full of jealousy for Wendy. What she said in her lovely tinkle, Wendy could not, of course, understand, and had believed some of it was bad words, but it sounded kind, and she flew back and forward plainly, meaning, "Follow me, and all will be well." What else could poor Wendy do? She called to Peter and John and Michael, and got only mocking echoes in reply. She did not know yet that Tink hated her with the fierce hatred of every woman, and so bewildered and now staggering in her flight, she followed Tink to her doom. Until next time. Love you.